Nearly every genre of storytelling has its parodies. From disaster movies to crime dramas to westerns to monster films and more. And the superhero genre is no different. Deadpool may be the most prominent example in recent years, but The Tick also comes to mind. Amazon couldn't bring themselves to renew that gem of a series, but they had $1 billion to dump on Rings of Power, And I also enjoyed the likes of Freakazoid and Earthworm Jim back in the 1990s. But today's sample from the vault dates back even further, to 1983 to be exact. The work in question? The Return of Captain Invincible, a superhero musical comedy starring Alan Arkin and the late, great Christopher Lee. Now, my familiarity with this film only extends to Lee's iconic musical number, Name Your Poison, which I will not be including in this video. Sorry, but I'm already being punished for spreading war and terror throughout the land while I was alive, and I do not need to add musical copyright infringement to my charges. So I think it's time to see if the rest of the film is of the same quality as this delightful song. In the height of World War II, Captain Invincible stands tall as America's greatest hero. With his powers of flight, magnetism, and an amazing computer brain, he strides forth to protect not just America, but the world from one of the most notorious threats it's ever faced. But when his reputation is dragged through the mud in a Senate hearing full of petty, paper-thin allegations, the superhero disappears without a trace, apparently retiring in disgust. Now, decades later, the villainous Mr. Midnight schemes in the shadows, and when hints of this threat reach the president, he calls for a worldwide search to find the missing hero. Sadly, the former champion has spent the intervening years in drunken destitution. So far gone, he's forgotten how to use his own powers. As Midnight's plan nears its completion, Captain Invincible has to relearn more than just his abilities. He needs to rediscover the cause he once fought for. Well, this certainly was a unique viewing experience. Perhaps the kindest description I can give, in terms of overall quality anyway, is several decent moments and one superb musical number in an uneven, jumbled movie. The central premise is straightforward enough. A disillusioned superhero has spent decades at rock bottom, and he has to recover his spirit and his powers in time to stop a resurfaced villain. And the decision to make it a parody, and a musical at that, can put a fun spin on the idea. Unfortunately, the necessary elements don't quite mesh together well enough to succeed. The humor tends to be hit and miss. Some of the jokes land well, but just as many feel forced or out of place. And the movie rushes its more serious moments, such as certain personal revelations or Captain Invincible's recovery, so they don't carry the weight that they should. The unsteady tone is unfortunately matched by rough editing. Shaky camera work distracts from quieter moments of dialogue, and multiple action scenes, including an attempted drive-by shooting in particular, are similarly marred by frequent choppy cuts. Sound quality is inconsistent as well, with volume rising and falling to make dialogue even more challenging to follow. But that could have also been the fault of my own audio setup. It doesn't help that the special effects on display are clearly a product of their time and have not aged well. And it's a shame, because the movie actually has some important things to say about heroism. Specifically, it uses the title character's story arc to demonstrate the grueling efforts of recovery from substance abuse, as well as the lingering risks of relapse, the importance of trust and promises, the value of an ideal to believe in, and the power of a patriotic spirit. These are all powerful themes that make for compelling storytelling, but they're unfortunately muddled by disjointed pacing and editing. As it is, the movie comes across as a well-intentioned but ultimately confused effort. On the bright side, the musical elements work out surprisingly well. With one or two exceptions, the songs are well integrated into the narrative, and they're often the most effective parts for setting the emotional tone. Name Your Poison is still the standout piece, but the other numbers are certainly worth a listen. Just be careful of who's within earshot if you decide to play the BS song. And as far as the acting goes, Alan Arkin and Christopher Lee carry this movie. The supporting performances range from serviceable to somewhat cartoonish to just plain odd, even for a superhero parody. Arkin, however, displays an impressive range of ability, able to go from bright idealist to pathetic inebriate to dejected cynic to recovered hero, and I was surprised at his singing talent during the musical numbers as well. As for Christopher Lee, well, it's Christopher Lee. The man elevates any production he's in, and this is no different. He plays the role of the cold, calculating, villainous mastermind like an old glove, something he can slip into as though it's second nature. But he really comes alive during the musical numbers, when he can put his singing talents on full display. The man was rocking those vocals well before his metal career took off. This movie's a mixed bag, but Lee certainly knew how to have fun with his character. And I respect that. The Return of Captain Invincible is one of the more obscure superhero titles out there, for understandable reasons, and so you're not likely to find it on the shelf at most stores. Nevertheless, there are physical copies out there in a number of formats, and they aren't very difficult to find through online merchants. I wouldn't consider this a shelf-worthy film, outside of the entertaining musical numbers, but if you're feeling curious and you keep your expectations at a reasonable level, then you're in for well, you're certainly in for something. Thank you for joining me in this brief look into the archives of my vault. If the story featured here interested you, please feel free to like this video, comment on what you enjoy about it, and subscribe to see more such overviews. And if you would be kind enough to share this video, it will not only help my channel to grow, which I appreciate, but it will bring more attention to these older or less well-known titles.